What's going on, everybody? This is JoshKnightTheFirst, and you are listening to and watching Henshin Attention. We're here to talk about a lot of new news that we got tonight, having to do with our latest Kamen Rider, the second of the Reiwa period, Kamen Rider Saber. Now, we just got done watching this new press conference, the first that we've seen, and this new footage, this new information that we've got a ton to go over. Let's go ahead and put that picture up there of Saber. So here we have our official picture of the cast and the multiple riders. Let's go ahead and take a look at them here. They're all color-coded here. We got blue, green, the dark rider there in the back. We are going to have multiple riders this season, not just the ones you see here. Multiple times during this live stream of the conference, we are looking at 10, count them, 10 riders in the show. That is insane. That's getting close to Ryuki numbers, where we hit 13 over the course of the entire show. 14 if you count the extra one from Decades. So let's go ahead and talk about this for a second. First impressions for this new rider. So, right off the bat, we are looking at a kind of fantasy plot here. Our main character here, his name is Toma Kamiyama. He's a fantasy writer and apparently a swordsman as well. He is going to be caught up in this battle to go ahead and defend from these creatures from an alternate world called Wonder World, and it's kind of an isekai style story. Now, for those of you who know, a lot of these animes are very popular right now. Isekai, where a character gets thrown into another world, things like that. There's a lot of very popular series about that sort of plot. But the thing of it is, I don't know that we've ever had something like this in Kamen Rider since Wizard or Ghost. So it's been a couple of years since we've seen this kind of motif. Speaking of Ghost, the head writer for the series is the same guy who wrote for Ghost. Now, some people might see that and go, ooh, I'm not so sure about that, because Ghost left a little bit to be desired in the plot department, but I'm hoping now, with the constraints of the way things are right now and having to write things, having to film things, that might actually fit with the way things are going nowadays. Now, when we're looking at the show here, the overall aesthetic of the show is very fantasy. They're leaning into it real hard. We're seeing this other world here. The thing of it is, I'm not so sure that everybody's going to buy into it. I'm buying into it, for starters. I know for some people it's really off-putting. Oh, it's so colorful. For me, I am totally buying this thing. So let's go ahead and talk about his driver there, the Seiken Sword driver. So this new driver is going to be using these things called Wonder Ride books. Now, these are going to be our collectible item this year. They're these tiny little books that kind of fold open when you insert them into the belt. And as far as the voice of the belt, every year we get a really well-known seiyuu or voice actor that ends up voicing the belt from the sound of it. They haven't confirmed it yet, but I imagine this news is coming very soon. It sounds like Akio Otsuka. Now, some of you might remember him from Uchu Sentai Q Ranger. He was the voice of Champ, Oishi Black. He's also done a ton of video game roles. He's a voice right now in Ghost of Tsushima. He's going to be a voice, or has been a voice, in Yakuza 7 or Yakuza Like a Dragon. And he's got a really good, crisp-sounding voice, the kind of a little gravel on it, a little age on it. Sounds great. And part of the reason it would seem like it was him is because I've heard a lot of his acting work lately playing all these video games. So I'm pretty sure it's him. You know, fingers crossed, but I'm like 90% sure that it is. Good to see people showing up here. If you guys have any thoughts on it, go ahead and put them in. We'll read into the comments later. So looking at this, we definitely have an evil writer to start out with, whose name is Kamen Rider Caliber. And then we're going to have two other writers show up after our initial two, who are, of course, Saber and Blaze. The other two writers are going to be named Kamen Rider Kenzan and Kamen Rider Espada. Now, they're being very careful to not show us too much about the other two writers. We can see a little bit of them. I'll go ahead and bring up the screen here. Just off to the, if you're looking to the right of Saber, up in the corner, this green rider, that should be Kenzan. And just beneath him, the yellow rider closest to Saber, that should be Espada. Now, as far as what their weapons are, we're not entirely certain. We got a little bit of a tiny trailer there, maybe about a minute and a half, and it does seem that the other riders there, everybody's going to be using bladed weapons or melee weapons. We're not going to have any guns this time around, which I'm actually kind of okay with, because that fits the aesthetic. And then everybody's going to have these giant honking horns, ghost style, on their head. Now, one thing to mention about this show that I'm really, really excited for is that for the first time since 2005, since Kamen Rider Hibiki, we will be having an ending theme for the show. Now, both the opening and ending for the show are going to be performed by a band called Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra. They're a really fun band. Some people might think, oh, it's going to sound a lot like O's because O's went for a very ska sounding soundtrack, but here we're getting a very ska opening. And it's been a very long time since we've had any song, insert song, what have you, for a writer series that actually mentions the writer by name. Last time I think we had that was Agito. Other than that, it's always just kind of hinting at things or things like that. You know, you'll hear references to the name of the writer, but actually saying Kamen Rider, whatever your name is, it's been since 2001. So we're looking at 20 years after the fact here. Now, going into this show, seeing that it's isekai, seeing that it's otherworldly, that leans into a couple of things that I think make a lot of sense because of the way things are right now, and specifically I'm referring to how things have had to adapt to a world living with coronavirus. I think part of the reason that we have an ending theme again after so many years is because, quite honestly, that takes up time during the episode, and so that's less you have to film each week. And then on top of that, if we're dealing with isekai, we're dealing with a lot of fantasy elements. That means more of an emphasis on the CG aspects, and we can deal with more time with the characters in suits, and that means less time of the actors having to interact with each other, which could work in their favor. That would lead to more fights, lead to more kind of spectacle, which a lot of people expect from tokusatsu, but I think this will all work in their favor. I've been theorizing for a while just exactly how this was going to go since everything started happening, especially with things changing with 01 and them having to film a little more socially distanced, having to understand that they've only got so much more time before this new show starts. And we do know 01 has finished they've wrapped as of today. We're ending at 45 episodes. The first episode of Saber here is going to be September 5th, and that should be the same day that we are getting the Seiken Sword Driver available in Japan. So, of course, everybody needs to keep their eyes out. If you're looking to get this collectible item, the belt, pre-orders will probably be going up any day now, at the very least within the first 2 weeks of August, I would imagine. Now, word of advice there, if you're getting a hold of the belt, be careful. Now, from what we're seeing from the initial scans and things like that, the belt should be retailing for about $74 US, give or take, for the transition between yen to the US dollar. If you're paying any more than that besides shipping, I would highly advise against that. Be careful going into this, especially if this is your first time getting into a series. Be careful. You don't want to spend more than is necessary. Now, at the same time, if we do in fact get the ability to support this through Bluefin over here in the US, I absolutely request that you guys put your money where your mouth is. Go ahead and support Saber. Show Toei over in Japan. We are very much excited about this show and that we want to support this thing financially. I know myself, I'm definitely getting one of the shirts, the three character shirt with Kuga, 01, and original Ichigo Rider there on that shirt, because that was one of the best designs they had out, and I really appreciate that. But if they get any Saber shirts in, you better believe I'm going to go after those, because they've got some very cool things that we can look towards here with the dragon motif, the lion motif there on Blaze's chest. And I do think it's very nice that we're getting the simplistic sort of basic color coding. There's a red rider, there's a green rider, there's a yellow rider, there's a blue rider. Some people might make a Sentai joke out of it. That's fine. They're all under the same tokusatsu umbrella, and we love it anyway. So let's go ahead and go over a little bit of the cast here. So Toma Kamiyama, our main character writer there, Kamen Rider Saber, he will be played by Naito Shuichiro. Now, he's a little nervous there if you look back at the footage here from this press conference, but that's kind of understandable. For a lot of people, when they start out in Kamen Rider, this is really their first gig. This is their first foray into acting. And from here, if the audience accepts them, they can go on to do amazing work in other shows. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what kind of a performance Naito gives. Our secondary writer, Kamen Rider Blaze, civilian identity Rintaro Shindo, is being played by Takaya Yamaguchi. Now, you can see there at the press conference, he was very happy to see Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra performing. Apparently, he's a very big fan of the band, myself included. If you want to, definitely check them out on Spotify. They've got a lot of songs on there. Give them a listen. Ren Akamichi, Kamen Rider Kenzan, will be played by Eiji Togashi. Kento Fukamiya, Kamen Rider Espada, will be played by Ryo Aoki. Mei Sudo, who was our heroine for the show, will be played by Asuka Kawazu. Tetsuo Daishinji, who apparently works with Blaze and with Saber on their belts, is being played by Hiroaki Oka. And then our kind of mystical guide character, Sophia, is being played by an actress named Rina Chinen. So that rounds out all of our cast that we got to see here on this press conference panel. Now, what's nice to see is that during this panel, everybody had partitions in between them to make sure that they were socially distanced, that they didn't have to endanger anybody. So good on Toei for making sure that was apparent. I almost didn't even notice it until about 2/3 of the way through the press conference that they had done that. So when they're doing these things and making sure to take care of their cast and you don't hardly notice, that's good. That means you're being able to give this press conference while giving people some sense of normalcy. Like, okay, this is the way we expected it. It's not the same as, say, Ultraman Zet's introduction where they did it on set, it was recorded. No, this was still done live the way they have been doing it for several years. Now, let's go ahead and talk about bikes, because riders in the name, we need bikes. We got a very quick shot of the two bikes that we have there for both Saber and Blaze. Saber's bike seems to be, looks like the same bike we've been dealing with the last couple of years. It's going to be a Honda XR 250 or 350, it changes depending on the year, which is a dirt bike style. They seem to like that one because it's easier to use for stunts. This is a first here, it seems. Blaze has a quad bike. We've never seen a quad bike here in Kamen Rider, and it looks really over the top and gnarly, but for a fantasy series, I think I'm okay with that. So I'm seeing a couple of comments here. Hope we get closing screens. A little bit worried about the story with Ghost's head writer being the writer. Let me go ahead and address that for a second. So, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Ghost went on for 48 or so episodes, and from where they started to where they ended, there seemed to be a lot of dead space in the middle, and that seems to be the thing that a lot of writer shows within the last several years seem to suffer from, where, you know, the initial 12 or 15 episodes are really high octane, we're trying to sell the toys, and maybe the last 10 or so we're getting into endgame, but the middle kind of drags on. Now, I think what'll help in favor of Saber is the fact that we're having to get through all of these things, introduce all these writers, and we can keep the action going that way. And I do believe this will be a much more action-oriented show, because if everybody's got bladed weapons, that means they'll have to fight it out. Now, as to how long it takes for all the writers to get on the same side, if we'll see any die off, only time will tell with that. Now, I'm hearing seeing a lot of talk here on Twitter about people talking about a tertiary female writer for the show. So far, we've got nothing that points to that yet. Nothing on the press conference panel seemed to confirm any of that. We haven't seen a design yet. We haven't seen any Toy Scan magazines having been leaked out, anything like that. Again, I very much hope that we do get one, since we've been able to keep things going right now in Kamen Rider 01 with Valkyrie. I would appreciate more of that time given to female characters and the female writers. Now, as far as some of the female characters here, like Sophia, I'm getting a lot of like Power Rangers Mystic Force vibes from her, and some of you have seen that, know what I'm talking about there. That she'll be our guide to the mystic world there of Wonder World, telling us about all these books and things of that nature, and helping perhaps Toma write his books, or maybe it's a case where the books come to life, things like that. There's a lot of things they can do with this motif. This is basically, in a weird way, and this might be dating myself here, Kamen Rider Page Master. When we're having to deal with all of these books, like from what we're seeing from the magazine scans, he's going to be borrowing powers from, like, say, Peter Pan, a children's fairy tale, to go ahead and power himself up. From what we're seeing, there's three kinds of books, three kind of Wonder Ride books that the writers can use. They're books based off fantasy creatures like dragons, so Saber will be using that. Actual creatures like lions, which is what Blaze will use, and then a third type, which will come into play later on. Now, from here, we've got a lot of things to look forward to. I'm hoping one of the things we get to see again, not just is the return of the ending theme, but the return of the insert themes, because we've only gotten so many here in 01. We've gotten maybe about, I think, a total of 3 over this whole run, since we're going to end at 45 episodes. 3 within 45 episodes, that's kind of lackluster, but I'm hoping that changes here. And a lot of that depends on, one, if you can get new artists to come in and sing these songs if you have the time for it, and two, if the actors themselves actually can sing, because more often than not, a lot of these guys have cross-trained between acting and singing, and a lot of them do have kind of a decent voice. And, you know, Avex loves to sell CDs. And the other thing they love to sell is the transformation item, a special version of that that plays, you know, the opening song or the opening jingle. Now, we did get to hear that ending thing there, which is apparently just called Kamen Rider Saber, that very ska-sounding song. We see there Takaya Yamaguchi, again, very caught up in emotion there, hearing it. And I think it's very important to take time and realize that, yeah, for a lot of these guys, these actors, these people there on the stage, this is their first time doing something like this. This is the chance to get out on stage, and for some of them, like Hiroaki here, who says he was a lifelong Kamen Rider fan, this is a dream come true, being able to be a part of this franchise. Now, for him specifically, when they were talking about what people's motivations were or what they were into, he said that he had been a fan of Kamen Rider his whole life, that he was watching O's while he was in middle school, which just makes me feel older, but then again, I have to remember it's been 10 years, so that makes perfect sense. But he's saying he very much wants to transform. Now, if we're looking at 10 whole writers for the show, I do highly believe that he will probably get to transform, probably second or third quarter, maybe save it for the end, but probably before then. I imagine before the halfway point, we'll get at least 8 writers in. Now, the thing of it is, a lot of series take up a lot of time by introducing their writers, because usually we have that kind of pattern where the writer shows up, they'll go ahead and show off all their powers or abilities, maybe get a form change in, everybody will job to them for an episode or two, and then we got to introduce the new power or the new writer, and that'll take up quite a bit of time if we're just doing like one writer an episode, which I don't think we're going to do. I think we're at least getting Blaze and Saber from the jump, and then the other guys will come in probably before episode 7 or 8, if I imagine, based off the way things have been going the last couple of years. Now, the thing of it is, with all that coming in, some people, I should say, have an issue with Kamen Rider being very toyetic. Now, we have to remember, this is a children's show aimed at like 3 to 5 year olds. They've got to sell these toys. And some of us who are much older than that happen to also enjoy these toys. Now, it all depends on how they're going to sell these out, if we are going to get all of them over here. I imagine we're getting the belt very easily from Bluefin. It would be nice to get any of the figures. They haven't announced what kind they are. I imagine we're getting the Rider Kicks figures, which are only so big. If you'll give me just a second here, my producer, if she can hand me the Geo figure that's right here behind her can, I'll show you guys what I'm talking about.
Behind my can?
Behind the can of soda, sorry. Thank you, producer. So this is what a Rider Kick figure looks like. They're only so big, about 6 inches tall. They've got a pretty decent amount of articulation. Normally what they've been doing is this kind of gadget thing with the bikes, where normally they'll fold out from what something is before. These retail for about, give or take, $15 to $20 US. They're very affordable, very durable. They don't have a lot of paint apps on them, but you can easily do that up with, say, some model paint or Gundam markers. So I imagine this will be one of the first toys that we get for Saber. As far as action figures go, of course, every year we also get the small Plamo figures, or not Plamo, the soft vinyl figures, the Softbee figures that are usually about, give or take, 300 yen. You can get them just about anywhere. They're very cheap. There will be a lot of things that we can collect from this thing as the series goes, as these characters become apparent on the show, as they introduce them. The other thing we're going to see a lot of is Premium Bandai really getting us in the wallet, because as you can see here at the press conference, they've got very unique clothing, specifically like for, say, Espada or Kenzan or Blaze. They've got these really nice buttoned up coats, these long flowing coats, and a lot of you might not know this about me. I'm a sucker for long flowing coats. That's why I like Garo so much and all those characters. So those are probably going to be a lot of money. So save up now. Japanese sizes do tend to run a little bit on the small side, so keep that in mind when you're on the lookout for it. I do see somebody commenting, oh, yes, hey, yes, this is a Drive shirt. This is from Premium Bandai. I had to order this one way in advance before one of the live concerts. It's got all the logos of the Heisei Riders up to Drive on the back. And yeah, it's a way of showing them directly that, hey, I'm involved, I'm invested in this series, I want to support it, let me put it on a shirt. So let me go ahead and look back here through the comments over here, see what you guys are saying about this new writer. Also psyched for Kosuke Yamashita returning to do the score. Loved his soundtrack from Gaim. Gaim did have a very good soundtrack. Depending on how you felt about the story, that soundtrack is really good, very good for RPing, things like that. The ideas behind Ghost Story, while ones that I enjoy, were not executed well. I welcome them being given another shot. I would agree. Just because one series wasn't exactly everybody's cup of tea doesn't mean another one might do better, quite honestly. Let's see here. Pandera, I'm hoping one of the books is a horror book or a Necronomicon. That I think would be really cool to see if, like, say, a movie writer or, your end boss is, using a more holy book, since the what we're using as far as the kanji for Saber, you see it spelled out there, and I'll go ahead and pull up the picture again just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. If you look at the very end of Saber's name as it's spelled out there in katakana, Seiba, you'll see the kanji there inside the what looks like a sword, and that kanji means holy blade. So hopefully we're looking at more holy books as the series progresses. We've got some other pictures coming in from the internet of all the other Wonder Ride books that he'll be using. Lion Senki, that's going to be the one that Blaze uses. Let's see here. Needle Hedgehog. I imagine that's another one for Blaze because that's a regular animal. Jaku Dragon, I imagine that's another one for Saber since that's a fantasy character. Brave Dragon, that's the one we know that Saber's using primarily. Storm Eagle, that would be another regular one, so I imagine that's Blaze. It seems like a lot of these will be used for Blaze since they're normal animals, but of course we'll see that as the series progresses, and we'll be seeing more of those things. I also imagine that we'll be getting a lot of collectible accessories where some of these books will have older writers in them, the Heisei writers, the Showa writers there in the book, and they'll have gimmicks as well. Question from Hayden Spring here. Do I have a Garo coat? No, but I'd love one. Yaz here. Well, I wish the design was slim as 01. The suit looks great in motion, even with the Digimon head. Yes. It's kind of hard to unsee how there on the shoulder, it does kind of look like he's wearing a Digimon on his arm. It's kind of hard to overlook that. Admittedly, I'm not that into Digimon to where I'm like, oh god, that's really a selling point for me, but I'm sure for somebody it is. So they can probably enjoy that as well. Smith here, isn't Storm Eagle a Mega Man 10 boss? Can't remember off the top of my head, honestly. It might be. Somebody can correct me on that. So really, I'm hoping that we'll get a lot of access to Saber over here, because one of the last things I want to talk about before I wrap up here is that as things have been progressing here in the US, as we've been getting more out of Tokusatsu and Bluefin working together to provide more Kamen Rider over here, I very much hope that Toei allows an option for us to stream or purchase, even if it's video on demand, be able to watch Saber legally. Because, let's be honest here, I would like to, Mega Man X, sorry, my bad. I would very much like to support this thing straight out the gate, not have to do the things we all know we have to do to go ahead and watch these shows. And we know we all do them. Tokusatsu kind of didn't hide the fact that we do when we actually got to see Heisei Generations Forever during that stream. So I wonder if they've already had something in the works to go ahead and allow Saber to be accessible over here. Now, if Bluefin has already talked to Bandai or Toei about getting the toys over here, then very much so, I would hope that they're also talking about the show, because it's interesting seeing how you would try to sell a toy without the show that complements it. It's like selling GI Joes without the cartoon. I mean, I know that's how that started, but after a certain point, it's like 80s cartoons and toy lines. They just go hand in hand together. Kind of the same thing with tokusatsu shows. If you're showing the show, you're doing that mostly to sell a toy, to sell a product. Storm Eagle is a Mega Man X character. Okay, good for the confirmation on that. Now we all know. So from here, we've got a whole nother year to go into this. We'll be seeing a lot more scans coming through. We're going to get a lot more spoilers before the end of Zero One, I imagine. Two things that we're not too sure about going into the future is that, one, because of everything that's happened this year, Zero One hasn't gotten the chance to film their movie yet. And usually by now, with the way things have been for the last, say, 10 years or so, the major movie for the currently airing Rider would have already come out, if not this weekend, then within a week or two in the past or the future from now. So I'm not sure how that's going to affect things as far as Saber is concerned. We do know if they're going to start here on September 5th, then they're very much trying to keep to the regular schedule that they normally have there in the fall. That way they can get to about episode 15 by Christmas, and that's going to be a real big push for one of the power-ups, I imagine. That's usually how it goes every year. So as far as, like, say, the team-up movie, the movie war, or first generation, whatever they want to call it this year, I don't know if that's going to be the last time we see Zero One alongside Saber, or we'll get something else happening here, because now we're kind of going into unknown territory, because for the first time in a long time, since I guess Drive, we're having the new writer show up, and they didn't get their intro through through the movie, where the first time we saw them was in the previous writer's movie. Now, granted, he can of course show up in, like, say, the last episode of Zero One, or he'll get hinted at, but beyond that, we're not sure yet. Hopefully it doesn't mess things up too much. I really want to see things end well for the Zero One cast. Zero One has proven itself to be pretty popular. I'm very much looking forward to how that ends, but at the same time, I imagine with the way Saber is set up, it's still going to be that kind of separate, weird, nebulous. Saber exists on its own off somewhere else, and Zero One's over here since it's more realistic, and they only cross over when they have to talk about, you know, other dimensions, or Wonder World being over here and Hidden Intelligence is over here. You don't really think about that too hard. You just want to see your heroes team up and do the things you like. So I'm only going to go for a couple more minutes here. Let me see if we've got any other questions or comments. Kamen Rider Black or Black Suit Superman? Black every time. Black Suit Superman is cool and all, you know, with the long hair, but nah, Kamen Rider Black. What are the names of the monsters? That I don't think we quite caught yet. I know there's more information out, and we should be getting more magazine scans within the next week or so. I wish I did have that in front of me, but unfortunately that's one of the few things I don't have information on right now. But we are going to see a lot of more of the monsters. We saw one here in the trailer. He's got, like, two hands holding onto a book on his head, kind of looking like Higurashi or Toga, what's-his-face from My Hero Academia. I imagine a lot of it will be booked theme. A lot of the monsters will probably be themed after famous characters from books, things like that. Might get a Sleepy Hollow type monster, or I don't know, Charlotte's Web. You know, just throwing some stuff out there. But they've got a lot to pull from. Let's see. If there are no gun riders in Saber, I'm glad Toei rarely does gun-focused fights in an interesting, high-energy way when it comes to Rider. I would agree. I think the sword fighting is a lot more interesting to watch. I definitely think back to Kamen Rider Wizard, when, because of the design of Wizard, they had to lend themselves towards that, because the rings themselves were a little flimsy, and they didn't want the stunt actor to break the rings by doing punches, so that's why they relied more on using the Wizard sword gun and kicks to go ahead and avoid that happening. And for the most part, it worked out better. Complementing that with the tricking that was done there to make Wizard do more flips and things like that, I think it worked out a lot better. And I imagine we'll see some of that here. We're seeing a lot more things done with the GoPro footage that they're getting, or the drone footage that they get during fights. I've seen them experimenting with that within recent Sentai series, within recent Rider series. And I think we're going to see more of that experimentation as time goes on, because if we can get more of these interesting shots, one, it'll look better to the audience, and two, I think it'll provide for more, like I said, interesting ways of making sure the audience doesn't see that we're keeping people more separate to keep them safe. And above all else, we want to make sure that the actors are safe and the people and crew working on the show are safe as well. So any of you guys who have any other thoughts on this, definitely let me know here, and go ahead and comment over on my Twitter. That's going to be JoshKnightFirst, one first. These are all my thoughts right here. I do hope that the final form is like King Arthur or something like that, because I was looking forward to that from the beginning. But this is all we've got on Kamen Rider Saber for right now. We've got a whole month to get ready for it. If we have the opportunity, definitely show people, use those hashtags on Twitter, let people know that you're interested, let people know if they want to get into the show. This is a great time too, because it's the beginning. They can get in and not have to know about any other information about Kamen Rider, and they can just enjoy this along with everybody else. So I appreciate you guys being able to come out tonight. Thank you for being with me for another stream, and as a reminder, your favorite heroes transform and change, you can too. I'll see you guys next time.